Well, a few weeks ago, we told you about what Justin Trudeau in Canada was doing to clamp down on personal freedoms. Of course, taking on the powers of the Emergencies Act and clamping down on bank accounts and making arrests of journalists and just free speaking Canadians. But wanted to go even more deeply and more broadly. In fact, he then he got on a plane. And as we covered this story a week and a half ago, he flew then to the UK, met with Boris Johnson, and talked about slippage. You know, how democracies, once they start slipping a little bit, then that's when you have to start to worry about governments, right? Like he said this with a straight face, that the governments, once democracies start slipping, then they're really not democracies. They're not standing up for our values anymore. And one of the things that he vowed the Canadian government would continue to do is to stand and fight against extremism, like the type of extremism that we saw as part of the Freedom Convoy that went to downtown Ottawa and said, you know what, government, I don't want to have you stick me with a jab so that my way of life is interfered with. I don't want that, standing up for personal freedoms. But they vowed to stand up and fight against these white supremacists and anybody else who was going to stand in the way of government doing its job. And now the United States is following suit because the Department of Homeland Security just issued a brand new guideline, new rollout of exactly how they plan to fight extremism in the United States of America. Thanks, Justin Trudeau.
Right. Okay. So the United States government is saying in the past, a lot of it is, if you read the document, a lot of it is kind of, we haven't been classifying these things good enough. We haven't been finding them. Sometimes we call things that are domestic extremism workplace violence. And so we don't catch it that way. So it's kind of like we're making a new list so that we can catch it better. It's kind of strange. If you look in the folder, I actually have the full document.
Is this it here?
That's a screenshot, but I have the full PDF if you want to find it.
PDFs in
here.
here,
Okay. I apologize. I was going to do that, but we'll put it in the newsletter tomorrow. But in addition to this sort of making clear guidelines on what constitutes violence and how to find it, and that sort of categorization work, they are also saying that they need a new case management system. And here's the part that had my ears perk up: information sharing mechanism for investigating related allegations. Here's a Jeopardy question. What is information sharing system, Edward Snowden? Right? So that's the part. So they're saying that they do not currently share interdepartmentally whenever someone is flagged as a potential extremist. So these are two conversations we should have here. One, how are you defining extremism? Is it a dragnet for free speech that we should be worried about? So let's put that on one side. And on the other side, we're talking about information sharing. Now, just in February, I went back for the notes for this show. We talked about how the CIA has been collecting data for years without the approved authority. This story right there. Remember this? This was just February, you guys, less than a month ago, where the CIA already admitted that it is collecting bulk data affecting Americans. And of course, lawmakers pretended to be outraged by it, right? So what is it that the Department of Homeland Security wants as part of this new extremist project that it doesn't already have? I don't have an answer. It
wants control. I mean, that's exactly what it wants, right? It wants control. It wants control of its people. I mean, this is what happens. Justin Trudeau was right in talking about slippage. He was right because, he's saying it with a straight face, but this is exactly what happens because governments, the United States was an experiment, right? It was the first, you could call it a republic, democratically elected, where we didn't have dictators, we didn't have authoritarian regimes, right? We didn't have an authoritarian leader. We had an elected leader, and it was an experiment. It was a world experiment, and it worked for 240 years, right? It worked for
some privileged men, sure.
Well, yeah, you could say that, and until you start to see slippage, right? Until maybe post World War I, post World War II, you see the United States slipping big time into a military-industrial complex run oligarchy.
But that's not what Justin Trudeau is saying. He's talking about how democratic ideals are slipping from what he wants you to think, right? And so this effing guy
Well, yeah, but what is the ideal?
He loses the right for the moral high ground to talk about democratic ideals when he has tamped down on democratic process by refusing to meet with peaceful protesters. So, like, okay, what? But I mean, let's throw that guy in the recycle bin.
What did Russell Brand have to say about this?
Yes. I love how he said, this idea, I clipped this little bit from his show because he talked about the same thing we did last week about how this idea of slippage is just an idea that you can use whatever media you don't like for your own accord. Let's let him say it because he's funnier than me.
And by the way, we should mention the show title for Russell Brand's show title about Justin Trudeau was, why didn't we know about this? And to which I say, Russell, if you were watching our show a week and a half ago, we covered this Justin Trudeau story that no one else was covering about his little speech that he gave in the UK. So anyway, we got to take a little victory lap.
During a press conference about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau claimed that it's a moment to stand against disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, and vowed to continue working with other nations to fight disinformation. Trudeau is conflating misinformation, disinformation, which are subjective ideas, with Putin's actions, which are obviously bad. Therefore saying, we have to stamp out misinformation and disinformation or else it might lead to more Putins. Is there nothing they won't do? Is there no misuse of logic they won't apply in order to pursue their own agenda? You know what's led to Putin? Go on, what? Joe Rogan. What? By slippage. We're shutting your bank account down.
We're shutting your bank account down. That's exactly what happened.
You want to say things we don't like? That you're a Joe Rogan Putin.
I think it's interesting that they include in that you have misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. Like propaganda is what the government, like every government everywhere does. Like you can, if that's democratic slippage, like you better check yourself.
Yeah, we've been doing it for decades in the United States. Propaganda, that's our middle name. We have a whole agency in the United States at the CIA devoted to lying. That's what they do for a living, is lie. That's what we do. We throw over...
Before censorship, social media was able to call that out. That's exactly what a lot of, these YouTubers are doing, is calling out the propaganda. But now, with these new rules, you're going to be not allowed to call out propaganda anymore. You're going to have to. That's the only news you can report.
Right. Yeah. And so, okay, then we can talk about, I think we've covered this, right? The idea that governments that say that they are for free speech are no longer, and they're using extremism as an arm to reach into anything that they don't like. That's problematic. And then the part about a dragnet of collecting your information and sharing it interdepartmentally is also problematic. And it's mentioned as something that they are intending to do as part of this memo, this new call to arms, which I am just skeptical that they haven't already done it.
Meanwhile, Edward Snowden pointed out, we have the war in Ukraine, right? So now we've got this on our plate. That's the lead story everywhere, of course, right? But Edward Snowden points out, he's like, hey, remember this huge story? CIA is spying on Americans once again. Here's this massive database. Here's what they're looking at right now. Can we have a discussion about this now? And it's gone. It's gone from the front pages. Like, you had to dig through an archive even to find this story that the CIA is collecting in bulk certain data affecting Americans.
Yes.
Where are these senators now? Where are these senators
busy.
now?
They're busy.
And now, if you just think about the birth of the Department of Homeland Security for a second, like I was thinking about this today. Think about in the wake of 9/11, right? This idea that we need a department to protect our homeland. Really? The people that attacked us on 9/11 came from Saudi Arabia, yet we're fine going over there and having cushy relationships with that oil giant.
Right, and there were reports that the CIA already knew that, so it's not that it was not caught. It just was not taken seriously.
So now we need a tighter dragnet on the American people with a Department of Homeland Security to keep our homeland secure. And how do we do that? Through control, right? We need to make sure that we're monitoring you at every airport, every bridge, every toll booth, everywhere. We need to do biometric reading of you. We need to make sure we have a centralized database so we can do everything that we need to look and follow and study and monitor your internet usage. And by the way, the NSA, we also need to follow and listen to every phone call you're making. That's how we keep you safe. Do you feel safer? Thank you. Thank you, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, for giving us the Department of Homeland Security.
Well, no, because I am not the kind of person that's going to say inflammatory things about the government, but I also am the kind of person who is critical about government action. And I feel afraid now because I'm not going to say anything obviously inflammatory. I'm not like lifting weights in the gym to rise up against any hegemony. But at the same time, what I can say acceptably continues to narrow. And that is terrifying.
Right. And now, thanks to this new government directive from your Department of Homeland Security, we're going to make sure that we have a database that will watch and take care of you. And we're going to be sharing all of this information internally with different departments, FBI, CIA, and so forth, to make sure that you guys are staying in line. You know, if you guys want to protest your government, we're going to keep you in a database. You want to speak out against getting no stimulus? You want to speak out against like the fact that Social Security cost of living increases aren't sufficient enough? You're going to be in a database.
I mean, look at this. It says the DHS has about 170,000 contractors that are vetting the population and has direct access to these systems, right? And so we need to communicate better with contractors. So that is not intergovernmental communication now. That's saying this information will be sent. I mean, you have to have a government clearance, but at the same time, this is going outside of the government as well.
Well, and what do they think is going to happen? I mean, it's like they always forget about blowback of these decisions that they make, because think about it. What free speech is and what allowing us to have a voice on YouTube is peaceful protest. It is our way of peacefully protesting against what we, believe is not true. And what Kennedy said is those that make peaceful protesting illegal make violent protesting inevitable. So it's like, what are they doing if you don't have a voice and nobody can have their voice and be heard when there's obvious things to be upset about? You're going to lead people to more incidents like January 6th and things where they have no choice but to go do that because they can't talk about things.
Right. Or if they stand up and they do talk about things, they get vilified. Did you see Madison Hawthorne, the congressman, over the weekend? This was a story that didn't get a lot of coverage. Well, it happened after our show, so we didn't get a chance to cover it. But it's worth talking about because the way that the mainstream media just slammed the crap out of a sitting congressman, Madison Hawthorne, who came out and said that Zelensky's a thug. Like, why are we sending money and supplies to this corrupt government? Like, raising the questions, frankly, we've been talking about here on this show, and yet he's been lifted up and held up as a messiah, as Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine. And he was immediately pilloried. I mean, just had to read every liberal rag out there slamming this guy for his take on Zelensky, a member of Congress who had legitimate concerns, and he laid them out actually pretty. But no, we had to go right down the road of throwing this guy into the bus.
Oh, you can go ride with the Dixie Chicks for saying that. You're in the back, buddy.
We're going to be crushing your albums, Clayton.
Yeah, we burn your albums. If you like this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, we have a membership program. For the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support independent journalism just by going to morninginvest.com/join.
You get access to exclusive videos, plus the ability to join and chat with us live. We really appreciate your subscription, and you are supporting independent journalism.